Welcome, believers. Welcome, you wonderfully weird people. Welcome to UFO Aliens and Weird Stuff. Fantastic. UFO Aliens and Weird Stuff, right? I'm going to start taking stories, UFO stories, I think. So if you would like your sighting to appear on the UK UFO hotspot map, or like I like to call it, the map of weirdness, drop me an email with your phone number and maybe I can meet you at the site and location so we can get your story out there, right? Now, your best bet is to email me on UFO Aliens and Weird Stuff Outlook.com. And hopefully, I mean, if you're not too far away, I can pop over and interview you. That'd be fantastic, man. Get your stories out because little stories are really important. I personally think they're more important than the big stories like Rendlesham Forest and all those sort of stories. Stories that are always told, right? So email me. And if you want, drop the phone number. I'll give you a ring and we'll have a chat about it, right? So, right, on to the main story, because we're doing two main stories today, right? So the first main story is the West Freugh Incident, they called it. Scotland's most chilling radar UFO case. Okay, so let's start the story, eh? Okay, so in the far southwest of Scotland, where the Irish Sea meets the rugged coastline of the Big Township, and I'll put it there, right, stands a military site with a long and secretive past. A place that began with airships in the First World War. You know, those massive dirigatories, right? They were housed there in the First World War. Then it evolved into a Second World War bomb and trials base. Okay. Then in April 1957, right, became the centre of what many call Britain's most compelling radar UFO case, right? And this is the story of RAF West Freugh. Okay, now let's do a brief history of the base, okay? Right, so before we dive into the incident itself, we need to understand the ground it happened on. Now, during the First World War, this site was known as RNAS Luce Bay, a base for naval airships patrolling Britain's vulnerable coastline. A massive airship hangar dominated the landscape where silent, you know, the dirigibles, the giant air things, once floated there, right? But by 1937, it reopened as RAS West Freugh, an armament training camp. Now, when the Second World War erupted, the base expanded rapidly, right? It trained navigators and observers, what's important, right? It became home to bombing and gunnery schools. It housed the bomb and trials units. Right now, aircraft roared overhead, bombing tests shook Luce Bay, and radar installations scanned the skies. So they were training, right? And then after the war, okay, the testing continued. So it was an operational base. West Freugh became one of the Britain's most important radar and weapons evaluation sites, which makes what happened in April 1957 even more extraordinary. Okay, so the calm before, right? So April 1957, a routine day. All right, not a lot going on. The Ministry of Supplies Bomb and Trials Unit was awaiting a test aircraft from RAE Farnborough. Right, civilian radar operators were on standby. Then weirdly enough, came a delay, right? Operators were instructed to turn off their radar sets while they waited. And like every situation in history, right? One unit, okay, Balscolloch near Corswell Point, right, never received that order. So they kept their radar on. Their radar stayed on. And what they saw would change everything, right? Now, the first contact, say 3 o'clock in the morning, right? I'm not 100% sure if that is 100% accurate, right? But the first contact, right? On screen appeared a large, solid echo. Not flickering, not faint either, right? This was solid. Okay, there was no doubt about it that something was there, right? And it was positioned over the Irish Sea, roughly 20 to 25 miles north of Stranraer. Altitude, they reckon it was about 50,000 feet. So quite high up. It wasn't moving, what's unusual. It remained almost perfectly stationary for at least 10 minutes, right? So at that height in 1957, very few aircrafts could operate comfortably and none could hover. Then something even stranger happened, right? The object began to rise. I mean, vertically, right? No forward motion, vertically. It climbed to 70,000 feet. Now, the radar operator later said it was unlike anything he had ever seen, right? So, that wasn't just the only thing as well, right? Bowles Collett contacted West Freugh Air Traffic Control. Soon, the main West Freugh radar locked onto the same target. So we've got two radar stations, right? Then, the Ardwell radar, 14 miles to the south, switched on and they confirmed it too. So now we have got 3 radar stations, same object. This wasn't equipment malfunction. Then it gets weirder because then the echoes multiplied. Several moving targets now appeared. Speeds, estimated in the 1,000 miles per hour, and the operators were stunned. The echoes were massive, far larger than conventional aircraft returns. And I will repeat that, right? Now, the echoes were massive, far larger than conventional aircraft returns. One operator compared the radar signature to something closer to the size of a ship rather than a plane in the sky. I mean, that's crazy, isn't it, right? Now, not only that, the impossible manoeuvre. After hovering, the object began to drift northeast at around 70 miles an hour. Then it accelerated. A third radar station tracked it as it travelled roughly 20 miles. And then it executed what was described as an impossibly sharp turn. No gradual banking arc, no wide curve, right? A sudden, sharp directional shift to the southeast. So if anyone's ever seen Tron, that is what they're on about, right? It went psh, psh, like that. It did, an aircraft will have to arc or bank, a bit like when you're driving your car, right? This was like that, right? A sudden, sharp directional shift to the southeast, accelerating as it did. Now, in 1970, Wing Commander Walter Whitworth would describe it like this, right? And I believe this is his own words, right? The object rose rapidly to around 60,000 feet in less than a minute, moved east towards Newton Stewart, lost height, then suddenly turned southeast towards the Isle of Man, accelerating to 240 miles per hour. But here's where it gets stranger, right? Ardwell radar began seeing not one object, but 4 smaller objects. 14,000 feet altitude, flying line astern, each roughly 4,000 yards apart. Now, Bowles Collett confirmed them, and for a brief moment, all 3 radar stations simultaneously traced 4 smaller objects trailing behind the larger one. Now, this was back in 1957, right? We are in 2025, come across what we used to call motherships, right? So maybe that first sting of the radar was the mothership, and those 4 trailing were the little ships that docked with it, right? Just saying, right? So for a brief moment, all 3 radar stations simultaneously traced 4 smaller objects trailing behind the large one. Then the echoes vanished. The entire event had lasted 36 minutes, right? So we've had 1 massive blip and 4 smaller bits, right? RAF intelligence reacted immediately. Radar stations across the UK were ordered onto 24-hour alert. Now, this was Cold War Britain, bear in mind, right? Everyone was paranoid. Unknown high-altitude objects were not taken lightly, right? But within days, the story had leaked. Civilian radar operators spoke to newspapers. On April the 7th, 1957, the Sunday Dispatch published the story, and questions reached Parliament. An Air Ministry spokesman refused details. Wing Commander Whitworth made a carefully approved statement. He says, I've been ordered by the Air Ministry to say nothing about the object. I'm not allowed to reveal its position, course, and speed. It was an object of some substance, quite definitely not a freak, what would mean a mistake. No mistakes could have been made by the civilians operating the sets, right? Eventually, the Air Ministry admitted something rare. They basically said they can't explain it, right? So yeah, they can't explain it. Official files were preserved carefully, perhaps because the story had already entered the public domain. Yet many details remain protected under the Official Secrets Act. Of course they do. We're never going to get to know the truth. In the summer of 1957, just months later, West Freugh housed airmen involved in Operation Hard Rock established a rocket training station on St Kilda. Britain was entering the missile age. Radar, obviously, was becoming more advanced. And yet, right, in April 1957, right, 3 radar stations tracked something that defied everything they understood about aircraft performance. There was no debris, no interception, and no official explanation. What should we call them? Just radar echoes. But they were solid echoes. Okay, so what do you think? What do you think of I know we haven't seen a big bona fide UFO, all right, but there were radar blips and something was weird on that night, okay? So, RAS West Freugh closed in 2001 and operations passed to another place, right? And the airfield fell quiet. But the coastline still remains. Where did 3 separate radar stations track for 36 miles? What did they track over Scotland in April 1957? Was it an experimental aircraft? I doubt very much. Was it an atmospheric anomaly? No, not buying that either. Cold War secret? No, I'm not buying that either. It was in something entirely different. I believe it was a mothership. But you let me know what you think in the comments. And if you enjoy the deep dives into Britain's strange UFO cases, subscribe to my YouTube channel. That would be fantastic. Because we all know that Scotland's Scottish skies around Falkirk, that sort of area, have more stories to tell.